if you could, everybody would obey the gospel. You'd have baptisms every time you had a non-member in attendance if you could control that. But you can't. What God is saying to you is, I don't expect you to be success. I don't expect the people to accept your message for you to be successful. That's not what I grade you on. I grade you on whether you faithfully tell them what I told you to tell them, whether you live by the message that you presented. Now, that's not natural. You have to train yourself to think in those terms, because just naturally, we judge our success based on how the people receive it. How many people respond to the invitation, how many baptisms we have, whether the audience says, good sermon today, preacher, I really like that one. But that might have been a failure. And the one when they went out and they wouldn't even talk to you and they went out the side door, that one might have been the successful one from God's perspective, So we are not responsible for what we do not control. Preachers are not responsible for what they do not control. A couple of passages, of course, other passages about this, my words, Jonah 3:2, where Jonah was told to preach the message God gave him, and then 2 Timothy 4:2 to preach the word. Now let's go into verse 8. I'll give you this note. This is an interesting phrase. The most rebellious is translated most rebellious. You look that up, and it means the essence of rebellion, the essence of it. It's the same idea that's found in Romans 8:7, enmity against God. It's deep-seated rebellion, enmity against God in the heart. They are most rebellious. God has been patient with them, but you can tell that God is tired of their rebellion, and he's repeating it over and over. Now, verse 8, but thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat that I give thee. Let's deal with the first part, and then we'll deal with the second part. First point to be made here is, before speaking to others for God, we must listen to God ourselves. Before we can speak to others on behalf of God, we have to listen to God. In other words, we're being a hypocrite if we tell people to do what we haven't done. If we're telling them, you should be right with God, you should do what God says, you should not sin, but we haven't done those things, then we haven't earned the right to preach. So that's what he's telling him. Hear what I say. He's not saying, I want you to go tell them and let them hear what I say. He's saying, I want you, Ezekiel, to hear what I say. So that's the first point. You hear what I say unto thee, not to them, but to thee. Now, the second part, be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Here's a way to sum that up, and this is interesting. I don't know that there's a verse that I found a verse exactly like this before. There probably is one, but off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of it. But what he's saying is, try to influence them if you can. But if you can't, do not let them influence you. Well, that's pretty simple. That influence business can go either way. That influence business can go like we want it to, which is we are changing the audience's mind and they are becoming more like God the longer that we preach to them. But has there ever been a case where there was a preacher that went to a congregation, and when he first went there, he was a sound preacher, but he kept preaching and kept preaching and kept preaching, and over time, he changed, but the church didn't change? Yeah, that's happened before. He became more liberal or more lackadaisical or more, he's just in it for the money. He's a hireling preacher, when in his youth, he was really on fire for God. So he let them influence him instead of him influencing them. We don't want to do that. We want to be God's man throughout our ministry from when we're young and idealistic until we're older and realistic. You know, we've got experience and we know how the world works more, but we're still the same person. We still are sincere in our consciences to God.